as we are getting toward the end of this phase 3 here. Got a couple people coming in, so I'll wait for them to get going. I am recording this, so please keep that in mind. If you want to turn off your video screen, that's always an option that I'm totally fine with. You can have me up, your choice. You don't have to, though. First off, make sure that you are muted. As we know with our kids, when they're not muted, sometimes the background noise gets a little chaotic and a little difficult to hear. Sorry, my cat's a little annoying. What we are going to be talking about today is kind of our next steps moving forward as we get closer to phase 4. I know we didn't have a talk last week because there wasn't really a whole lot of development, but there's been a lot of development since last week. So I want to make sure that everybody's up to date with that. So we have a big presentation kind of to start off with. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to put them in the chat, either to everyone or to me privately, and I'll be more than happy to answer those as we get along. We will also have time at the end for questions if you have questions. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get going. Our outline for today is we're going to talk about return to in-person programming. We're going to talk about the protocol for participation, as well as practice eligibility and billing. So starting with in-person training, there's a couple of things that affect our timeline for return. First is facility readiness. Second is capacity of the facility. Third is phase 3 versus phase 4. And lastly, scheduling and safety. So we're going to talk about each one of those individually here as we go. First, we're going to talk about facility readiness. And we have a bunch of different facility partners that we work with, and they all are a little bit different. So for schools, they are limited by the IHSA, which is the Illinois High School Association for Sports, as well as individual school restrictions based on their guidelines with their boards and superintendents. Right now, they are not allowed to have skill-specific activity, which is swimming is considered a skill-specific activity. They're allowing, that's just in general at the school themselves. There are age restrictions at many of our facilities, especially the high schools are limiting access to high school age-only athletes. OLPH and Baker, we're going to get to a little bit. Sometimes some of these facilities have student-only restrictions, and some of them are not going to be open or available to us until the fall. When we talk about our more private or public facilities, Centennial, JCC, and private clubs, first step is we have to have water in the pool. Some of these facilities do not yet have water in the pool, or they're in the process of doing that. They need to have safety protocols in place and a process and procedure that they are looking to have ready to go, that they feel comfortable with having us in place for that. Some of these have restrictions on age of the participants. This is mostly the JCC and private clubs. Centennial has a little bit more leniency, but generally JCC and private clubs, it's a little bit more restricted based on the older kids. We are restricted on the number of participants. This may or may not be affected by the change to phase 4. We're still waiting to see that. And the financial cost of rental. Most of these private facilities are very, very expensive. We're talking $20 per hour per lane. So that becomes very, very expensive as we look to program further down the road. Then the second thing we have to think about is the capacity of the facility. How many lanes are available in the facility? Is it reasonable for us to look at this as a financial, does the financial outweigh the physical? Is there pool time available? What pool time do we have available? And we'll be talking about the different facilities and what those availabilities are, and what the safety measures at the individual facilities are. Different pools have different safety measures, and as I've been working with different facilities, there are some that I've talked to where I don't feel comfortable with the safety measures they have in place because I don't feel that they're going to make sure that our athletes are safe. Okay, the next piece is phase 3 versus phase 4. In phase 3, we must have a 1-to-10 ratio of coach to athlete. This is what we would call a practice group. So per practice, we can only have 10 athletes. It means we have shortened practice time from 30 to 60 minutes. There's a strict 10-foot radius, strict mask usage, symptom monitoring on site. Athletes who travel out of state must self-quarantine for 72 hours prior to returning to workout and exhibit no symptoms. This is actually a little bit more lenient than some of other policies that are out there for other teams, not necessarily in our area, but in other areas that I've spoken with. But in talking with a couple of medical professionals, this is about the closest we can get to actively monitoring that, and international travel is not allowed. In phase 4, Group sizes will expand, which we would call could be more consistent with our training groups. This is dependent on the IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health. We're anticipating a 1 to 24. What's been told in phase 4 is that the gatherings are 1 to 50, but we anticipate that youth sports will not go up to that 1 to 50 range. So we're anticipating a 1 to 24. We will be able to have longer practice times from 30 to 75 minutes. Strict mask usage. There'll be more at-home monitoring, but we will still have an in-person check-in. Domestic travel would be permitted without penalty, but families are encouraged to encourage best practices and reasonable safety measures when we get to phase 4. And international travel is permitted, but upon return, athletes must be self-quarantined for 14 days prior to returning to workout. And international travel does include Mexico and Canada. We had some questions about that from some of our members, and I want to make sure that that is clear. Next, scheduling and safety. At this point in time, while we are in phase 3, we are restricting programming. Switching established practice groups is not allowed. When we arrive in phase 4, we will have the rest of the team in the water with appropriate guidelines and a consistent schedule to the best of our ability. All practice groups must be staggered for a minimum of 10 minutes apart for arrival. Basic precautions we're taking, and we're going to go into that a little bit more about what our precautions are, but generally speaking, all groups will be required to adhere to our policies and procedures. All athletes and parents will be required to participate in a Zoom training on return to pool strategies prior to attending the first workout. Senior High Performance went through this on Thursday. It takes about 45 minutes. It does allow for, it goes through how we come into the pool and leave the pool. It's an 11-step process. And so we do want to make sure we have that. And all athletes will need to have 2 waivers on file, a hold harmless waiver and an understanding of parental responsibility that will need to be, we'll need to make sure that we have on file. And those are going to be e-documents. So you're going to be able to do those pretty easily from your phone. Facility scheduling updates, because I get a lot of questions about this. Centennial's in the process of coming online within the next week, barring major issues. Those times will probably be mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and late night. So you can kind of loosely sort of look at those. The Lake Forest Club we have started practice at right now, just on Saturday and Sunday. SHP is going to be working with the facility this weekend to create a video for appropriate training to use with all of our groups. So this will be to show how kids come into the pool, how athletes show up, what the interchange looks like, what 6 feet looks like, how they have to wear their masks, all the steps. All 11 steps, so that it's something that every athlete can understand relatively clearly just by seeing their peers go through it. JCC is looking to be available as early as July 1st. The times are TBA. They're probably going to be around mid-afternoon. We are also working with some other country clubs, and we're working on fostering relationships for access to those. These are the 4 most promising places where we are going to have pool time available within the near future. And when I say near future, that's before July 4th. Next, we have Baker, which is possibly going to be open for in-person dry land at some point in phase 4. OLPH is going to be possibly open for in-person programming as well in phase 4. Nutrier is also going to be open for in-person programming in phase 4. Right now, it does not look like we are going to have access to pools because the IHSA has not opened pools for high school programming yet. And Loyola is not going to be open to outside rentals until the fall. One of the best part of the things that we have going for us is that we are going to have all of the, with all of our partners, we are the only person that they're looking to work with. They're not looking to try to work with somebody else. And so as much as you may want to and feel like it would be great to give a phone call, and I appreciate the support and enthusiasm, we're actually at a point where we know that we're going to be the people that are in there, and we're just waiting for them to get into a place where they're ready and have the protocols in place where they feel comfortable having outside people come in. And as we're working through that, we've found that they're very happy to work with us. They're excited to have us on board. We just need to be patient, and a lot of this patience is going to be required until phase 4. Next piece is protocols and procedures. So this is a lot of questions we've been getting from parents is, what do we do when we're going to get there? Are we going to just make the kids wear masks all the time and that sort of thing? So we're going to go over athlete expectations, parent expectations, coach expectations, practice planning, and what socially distant workouts really mean. One of the things that we're going to talk about in here, a lot of this is going to be what's in your actual training, but this gives you an overview. So I'm not going to go real in depth with each of these expectations, but we're going to kind of touch on a couple of highlights here just so you have an idea of what we're looking for as we get back into the pool. First up is athlete expectations. Arrive 5 minutes before workout for screening. No mask, no practice. Use the bathroom prior to practice and arrive in swimwear. Bring only absolute necessities and sanitize hands prior to entering workout. No locker room or restroom usage will be allowed for changing. Emergency use only. This I cannot emphasize enough. The coaches have not been hired to clean bathrooms, and every time someone uses the bathroom, the bathroom has to be disinfected. So while the bathrooms will be available, they are for emergency use only. Athletes will remain in a mask until it is time for workout and will put a mask on immediately upon the conclusion of workout. 10 foot of distance between workouts. Cover all coughs and sneezes. Do not share equipment or water bottles. During the first 10 days that a group is in practice, you will not be using equipment. We will just have caps and goggles just to get used to the protocol before we start dealing with equipment. Athletes will need to leave at the conclusion of workout with their mask and swim apparel on, so you will need to come in your swimsuits. You will need to leave in your swimsuits. The athlete does not feel comfortable working out in person. Reasonable accommodations will be offered until phase 5. Okay, once we hit phase 5, we will no longer have in-person, we will no longer have online dry land only. Actually, I should make sure you watch that one more time. So if you want to just kind of take a quick look at this. And again, all of this is being recorded and I will be putting it online tonight and sending an email out to the whole team. Next is parent expectations. Attend mandatory Zoom training specific to the facilities where your athletes will be training. Sign 2 waivers. One that's a hold harmless and one that's parental responsibility and understanding. Be aware of your athlete and check them for symptoms and temperature prior to workout. A temperature of over 100.4 will not allow practice participation. Remind your athlete to only bring what they need. Arrive on time for check-in, which is 10 minutes prior to workout, and stay for 5 minutes to ensure that your athlete is cleared. Make sure, and you'll need to stay in the car for the duration of the workout. Parents are not allowed during the workout due to gathering restrictions. Again, that 1-to-10 ratio is all we get, and we do want to make sure we stay inside of that. Reserve any questions for coaches to emails rather than in person. Understand the we are now moving into a medium to high risk level of exposure to coach your athletes. So please respect their decision to do so, or if they have decided not to. That is one of the things that with this, all the coaches have had to go through training. And that's one of the things we had to talk about was they are at a medium to high risk in order to coach athletes, and they are choosing to make that choice. Immediately report any contact that your athlete or family may have had with a COVID-19 positive person. We're going to be discussing the ramifications of that in a little bit. But it is important that if you go and travel to see, say, your mom, and your mom happens to have COVID, and you come home and you hang out with give your kids a hug, you have now brought that into our sphere if your child then goes to practice. So we need to make sure that that happens. And if you do have that contact, we need 72 hours at a minimum where the athlete is not coming to work out. When traveling, please use reasonable effort to maintain social distancing, face masks, and hand washing. And pick up your athletes within 5 minutes at the end of workout. Sometimes we have trouble with athletes being picked up in a timely manner, and this is not a situation where we're going to be able to do that. Repeat offenders will be removed from the practice setting. Next up is coach expectations, just so you have an idea of what the coaches are required to do. They have to participate in 2 trainings, one on COVID and one on protocols and procedures that are specific to facilities. They must wear a mask or face covering at all times when coaching or in public to limit overall exposure. They arrive 30 minutes early to prepare the facility for athletes. They must record attendance, temperature, and symptoms of all workouts, including their personal statistics. They must restrict parent and spectator viewing. They must maintain 6 to 10 feet of distance from athletes. They must remove any athletes from practice who do not adhere to guidelines. They must disinfect any furniture, bathrooms, facility space that has been in contact with athletes. So even if your athlete puts a bag down on a chair, we're required when they leave to clean off the chair. So when we tell them not to put their stuff on a chair, we're not trying to be mean. We're just trying to limit the amount of work in between that 15-minute range, because that's not actually a lot of time. And you need to be ready for that next group of athletes to come in. They are not allowed to travel while we are in phase 3, and they must limit domestic travel and monitor health in phase 4, and they are not allowed to travel internationally at this time. They have been recommended that they are not to participate in large gatherings until phase 4 at a minimum, but even then exercise extreme caution. Get a COVID test or an antibody test if possible, and if they don't feel comfortable, we are allowing them to work in that online environment until phase 5. Sorry. Practice planning. So first, workouts will be staggered at least 10 minutes apart to allow for safe entry and exit from the facility. In the event of a positive test or contact report, affected workouts will be canceled for 72 hours and we will evaluate whether a longer hiatus is necessary pending individual circumstances. So let's say somebody in like the third workout of the day, we get a call from them later in the afternoon or the next day saying that they had contact with somebody that apparently now has COVID. We have to trace that back and we have to cancel all the workouts that are from that practice forward, like later into the workout. So like if that practice was at 10 and we have workouts scheduled all the way until 9 o'clock at that particular facility, all of those workouts are canceled for 72 hours until we figure out, and possibly longer depending on what the facility requires and what the contact tracing ends up coming back with. We're not epidemiologists, so it does take us a little bit longer, but the 72 hours is an Illinois guideline. Please understand that this information on the virus is evolving daily, and we will try our best to stay ahead of all requirements and information. So again, I'm going to say this a lot of times as we go through this. What I'm saying now could be different in 3 days. Just like the lakefront was supposed to not open until phase 4, and it's opening up on Monday for the lakefront walk. Things can change depending on circumstances. So this is where we're at right now and what we're planning at moving forward. There may be little changes here and there, but for the most part, this is the policy that we are looking at carrying forward. Training groups are going to return to work on in staggered order to ensure that protocol is efficient and effective. It does take a lot to train, to get ready, and be prepared, both for the coaches and the athletes to be in the pool area. Again, we're talking a 1-to-10 ratio or a 1-to-24 ratio. That's not exactly the best in terms of trying to corral a bunch of kids to make sure that's going and making sure they're staying 6 feet apart. So we want to ease everybody in. SHP is in now. The next group is probably going to get in prior to phase 4. Phase 4, right at the beginning of phase 4, we're going to see D7, A10, junior advanced and senior advanced come in. Right after that, D6, A9, junior and 14U, D5, A8, novice are going to come in 4.2. So they're going to kind of, and I don't know how long that time's going to be. A lot of that will depend on how much pool time we get and what that looks like. Again, we're going to be deciding that based on what the numbers are that the IDPH comes out with as we look into phase 4 for youth sports. And we don't know what that's going to be yet. So we're having to wait, and I can't say, 3 days later it's going to be this, or 4 days later it's going to be this. We're having to go at the speed of the public health department, which is not always as fast as we'd like it to be. But that's the track that we're going through. Athletes will not be able to switch between practice groups, which is the 1-to-10 ratio, or training groups, which is the 1-to-24 ratio. And again, the 1-to-10 ratio is going to affect, when I'm talking about the 1-to-10 ratio, I'm talking about everybody that's this group and this group. They're going to be in the 1-to-10 ratio. When we get to these groups down here, this is going to be a 1-to-24 ratio or 1-to-20 ratio, which is going to be a little bit larger. And so that we're hoping that that will eliminate the need to have movement in between training groups. And that is going to, the reason we have that is because we have to minimize group contamination and aid in contact tracing in the event that we have an outbreak. So it's not just because we want to make sure that those groups are controlled. It's also so that in the event that there is contact or something like that, we can trace it back to those groups and contact the right people. So there's not going to be a whole lot of flexibility in terms of training groups once we get into the next phase. Okay. What does a socially distant workout look like? So this is just kind of an overview of 18 swimmers. This would be kind of what it would look like in a practice setting. Right now, water polo is not allowing contact drills right now, so it will look very similar. This is, sorry, allergies. Whew. So in general, we'd be looking at having 2 different practice groups. This group would probably be the first group that would come in, and then 10 minutes later, this group would come in. As long as the distance between these groups, as long as this distance right here is 30 feet or more, they can be in the water at the same time, but we have to stretch that out. Obviously in a long course pool, that's a little bit easier to come by than a short course pool, but this is what, when we're looking at social distancing, this is what it's going to look like, and the athletes are going to have to be able to stay this far apart. Generally, when you see the athletes that are in the 2 per lane, we try to make those sibling partners if at all possible. But again, you're looking at trying to make sure that these athletes are staying that far apart, 6 feet apart, even in the water. And that's actually pretty hard to do. We've found that it's been challenging, even with the senior high performance kids. And they do a really good job. They really do. But it's hard just because of when you're coming into the wall and when you're leaving and that kind of stuff. And you have to stay distant while you're swimming at the same time. And so that's challenging. So next piece is participant eligibility and billing. Okay, so in this, we're going to be covering who's eligible to practice, what the billing process is going to be, what our future plans are, and some of the common questions that we have had come up. First is those that are eligible for in-water workouts are anybody with current active accounts with NTA who have been actively paying monthly dues from April to June. Water polo athletes, it would be anybody who has been playing from May to June. SHP, this is the order that they're coming in and the order that we're going to be implementing practices. Anybody not eligible for in-water workouts at this time is anybody who has just paid a retainer of $100 but has not paid monthly fees from April to June. They are considered tier 2. Anybody who did not pay a retainer and plans to return in the fall is considered tier 3. And anyone who has not been an active member of NTA in the past 9 months or new prospects are considered tier 4. So those are, and that makes a little more sense as we go through a little bit more of this, but this gives you a general idea. We are giving priority to the people that have been coming to practice the most and continuing their financial commitment to our program. So when we're talking about billing for June, athletes have paid the online dryland fee. Any water workouts that get added in the month of June will be charged at a prorated weekly fee depending on the group. For example, senior high performance pays $190 a month for June dryland. Their in-water fee is usually, when we're in water, is $350 a month. The difference between that is $160. So per week, they're going to have to pay $40 per week that we are in the water practicing. Okay. For July and August, we anticipate a full team return by mid-July. I don't see a single group being out of the water any later than July 14th. I'm hoping for earlier, but I want to make sure that we're trying to have reasonable expectations, and we all know the weather in Chicago is a little volatile, so we never know when that actually is going to be viable. And if you've ever run a pool before, you know that there can be hits and misses when we start in pool operations. Fees are going to be prorated according to the access to the pool in a similar fashion detailed in June. There will not be a normal number of workouts nor a normal amount of in-water practice time. If you're like, hey, my kid's in junior performance and we always have 6 to 7 workouts a week, we are not going to have that. Realize that you are probably going to be at half the number of workouts you are looking at in best case scenario, and prepare your athletes for that. That's an important conversation. Pool fees are very high this summer, as I talked about earlier. We're talking an average of $20 per hour per lane. So again, that's $20 per hour per lane. And we must accommodate that adjustment to our billing process as we look to accommodate. Again, the 1-to-10 ratio is significantly more expensive than when we go to the 1-to-24 ratio. Standard programming when we're in a normal season in a normal environment is usually somewhere around 32 to 56 athletes in the water at any given time at one facility. We might have 2 groups in. That makes the number a little bit higher, or 1 group in, and it's a little lower. Phase 4 is going to be 24 to 32 at the most. So that means it's going to be 1 practice group in the pool at a time. This then also drives up the cost of our pool rental space and pool rental time. As a result, we will not be prorating for individual athletes beyond what is applied to the practice groups as a whole. And that's the training group or the practice group. That's an interchangeable term in that sense. Future plans. All groups are going to be limited to 24 active roster athletes. Some are currently above or below that, but beginning in September, this is going to be our policy moving forward to prepare for a possible return to phase 3 in November or December. One of the things when I talk with all our facility partners is that they are talking about how they will be making a decision perhaps to scale back the access to their facilities, and that will have a limited effect on what we are able to program as well. So we want to make sure that we are able to program at a 1-to-24 or 1-to-12 ratio and be prepared for that in advance. Next, I'll get my mouse on the right screen. Once in phase 4, current active tier 1 athletes will be able to take a 1-month hiatus from programming for a $50 retaining fee beginning August 2020. So provided you pay and participate in July, if you want to take August off, you're more than welcome to, but you will have to pay a $50 retainer fee to stay active with the program and reserve your spot so that it does not get taken. Failure to return to full programming after the 1 month will deactivate your membership, and available spots will be offered to Tier 2 athletes. If and when we return to phase 3, failure to participate will result in spot relinquishment regardless. There will not be an opportunity to have a $50 hiatus. You will be in that practice group. So high school athletes will practice with their high school team in the fall. That spot will be reserved for high school athletes, so it's a little bit different in that sense, but because you will have paid that fee to keep going as far as that goes, because we will be continuing a monthly fee piece. Some programs may not have significant water time, and we may return to online Bryland programming. Prices will be scaled accordingly. Phase 2, if we go to phase 2, a shelter in place, we will return to online dryland for all groups. So please, please, please wear a mask and wash your hands. The more we can do to help our community and stay out of that phase 2, the better things are going to be. Future plans. Next up, competitions. There are no competitions that are going to be sanctioned until August of 2020. I envision that that's probably actually going to continue through August of 2020 because many teams in Illinois do not have access to pools right now at all. We will look to virtual competitions and inter-squads. Our coaching staff has worked with a couple of models, but a lot of that depends on access to pools and the ability to use starting blocks. Right now, the use of starting blocks is not something that teams are allowing or facilities are allowing because that's touching a physical object. So that's something that we're hoping to see a change as we move forward through this. One of the questions that we've been hearing is why practice then? If we don't have meets, what's the point? First off, physical benefits. Your kid's gonna get in the water. There's something that is emotionally amazing about swimming in the water that makes you feel better, that makes you feel calmer, that makes you feel more relaxed, that makes you feel like you're kind of at one with something more important if you want to get super zen with it. So regardless of whether you're swimming or you're practicing water polo drills or you're whatever, it's what are you doing right now, and being in that moment and being in that pool is going to be so great. The social benefits, they're going to be able to see their teammates even though they're socially distant and they're not allowed to actually hang out. Just being able to be with your teammates and do something together in a collective body is really important. And everybody's having the same thing where it's a little tough right now. And so we've got to kind of work through that together. And then lastly, swimming's a unique medium. If your athlete has long-term goals in this sport, the more you can be in the water, even if they're little, even if they're like 7 or 8 years old, just being in the water can help. It helps with basketball, it helps with football, it helps with soccer, it balances all those out. Plus, it's an interesting medium in as much as your body is in a horizontal plane, moving through a gravity neutral environment, using the propulsion from your hands while you're trying to hold your breath at the same time. These are skills that are actually relatively complex. The dry land we've been doing is really made a big difference. When I watch the senior high performance kids in the water, just in 2 very short 40-minute workouts, we're able to see a difference in what they're doing and what they're accomplishing. And I think that's something that is worth doing. I know I would like to get in the water sometime soon. Registration for fall strategy is pending on this, but it's not going to be the normal registration process. A lot of it's going to depend on what the high schools do and what the high schools decide, because that's where a lot of our facilities are based. But we're working with them, and we should have an answer, I'm hoping, by mid-July, so that I can speak to what our registration for the fall is going to be. And lastly, Safe Sport, please take the online courses to help our team get Safe Sport certified. They've been sent out a couple of times. We're literally like 8 parents away from getting our certification. So if like a third of you that are on right now just took it as soon as we got off, it's a 40-minute webinar just like this. We'd get there. If we have to have, I believe, 22 more athletes from ages 12 to 17 take the athlete class. If you've got an athlete that's in that age bracket, please have them take it. It's super important. And we are going to be making every effort to have 2 coaches on deck. With 2 workouts going on, we are going to have 2 coaches on deck, so we will be able to have that supervised. And we have a coach that is stationed off deck that is going to be doing the check-ins. Other common questions we have: are we going back too fast? When we did the survey, there was an overwhelming amount of concern that we didn't want to rush this process. And I know there's a lot of you that are really eager to get back, but I think it's important to understand that there's also a lot of people that are equally nervous about coming back too fast. And IDPH has determined that swimming is a safe activity at a 1-to-10 ratio with 30 feet between groups during phase 3. We are limiting phase 3 for that reason to minimize coach and athlete exposure. One of the arguments I received from some parents last week was that young kids don't get it. Yeah, but coaches do. And we have a lot of coaches that are in that may have that put them at a situation where they may be susceptible to this. And so it's important to understand that we want to minimize that coach exposure as well. And we don't want to have things travel from athlete to athlete. There are a lot of athletes that have grandparents at home that's important. They may have somebody at home that is immunocompromised. It's important to understand that one of the things with this virus is that just because you don't die doesn't mean it's not bad on the other side. And we want to avoid that too. And so the more we can do that, the better. Next question is, why are the little kids last? With a 1 to 10 limitation, we're splitting up groups of athletes who are friends and where that social aspect is vital to participation and engagement. We're looking to phase 4 as an ideal time for that initiation. Remember, phase 4 is June 27th. We're talking about 2 more weeks. It is also quite difficult with each micro group of athletes. When we did the full schedule, even with all the access we could get, it ends up being 40 workouts, and we couldn't keep everybody having the same amount of time between each of the groups and still work around the lap swim that we had available. So with us knowing that we might have a couple more facilities coming online, especially after the 26th, that's going to be a great time for us to get everybody in and start looking at how we can do that. Phase 4, again, is starting June 27th, which is when our programs will be returning to available water. I feel very confident in that. I'd say like 75%, so don't quote me on that. But we do have that. And then the last question I think is, why aren't we doing in-person dry land? First, with a 1 to 10 ratio, we'd have to program 40 practice groups, and we did not have space to fit outdoor in-person dry land at one of our facility partners, as well as make sure we had reasonable parking possibilities that maintained the requirements of the facility's social distancing. So like the high schools, we can't get in there until phase 4 anyway. Using backyards is a major liability for the homeowner in the event of an injury. Using parks is a major liability for the team and in the event of an injury. And soccer fields and similar are reserved by those teams who have partnerships with those facilities. Because we're not a soccer team, because we're not a baseball team, we don't have access to those facilities. We don't have relationships with those facilities. And those facilities are going to prioritize their people just like the pools are prioritizing us. And like I said, every single facility has said that we're the only one that they're renting to. New Trier has told us we are the only one that they're going to rent to. And that's kind of what we have to go on. As much as I would like to go, that's, and get that going. When it was like, okay, well, maybe we might get something on the 22nd, when we know we're a week away from getting more pool time as well, we can get most of the groups in and go from there. Thank you for your time, and realize that everything could change in the next 72 hours. Like literally, this was a completely different presentation 3 days ago. So understand that this is something that evolves, and 3 days from now, I could have another pool that comes online because they've decided to change their policies and get us up and going. And I hope that's the case. But I will leave it there. Again, if you have questions about billing, please contact Kristen. She's our business manager. And if you have questions regarding the policies and procedures, or you would like more clarification on our return to pool, please contact Coach Greg. He's our safety coordinator, and he has coordinated the training that every group will be going through prior to their first workout. And with that, does anybody have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat if you don't want to speak, or unmute yourself and go ahead. I'm going to end the screen share here. Anyone? The training classes are going to be all online. So they're going to all be Zoom, so you won't have to go anywhere. We're just going to have it in we'll have documents where you'll see the facility layout, and then there'll be directions into each step that you're going to be going to. So you won't even have to go anywhere. We'll try to schedule them around when your groups have had group meetings already. That was kind of an intentional decision to start group meetings in Zoom so that we're comfortable with that. There are not going to be any tryouts right now. We do not have additional space available for athletes. I know our novice group is pretty small right now. but where that is sitting, we are not looking to bring any new athletes into the program at this point. That may change when we get to July for family members only, but that'll be for active family members only, but that'll be the only adjustment that we make for that at this point. Again, that could change if we get more pool time open up, but that's what we're looking at. Okay. That, and again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a little while. I see our board president, John Hagist, is also on. If you have any questions, feel free. More than happy to answer those if you've got individual questions. But other than that, have a great evening. I'm going to stop recording right now.